College dorms have their own kind of silence. It's not peaceful, more like a silence that waits. Between the thin walls and the hum of a dying fluorescent light, you start to realize how alone you really are. That's when the strange things feel louder. The quiet knock, the shuffle of someone outside your door, the way footsteps echo in a hallway that should be empty. Most people think of college as a beginning. For some of us, it became a nightmare we never asked for. These stories were told by students who swore what happened to them was real. 4 different campuses, 4 ordinary nights that went wrong in ways no one could explain. They're not stories about haunted buildings or curses. They're about people, real people, whose behavior slipped just far enough from normal to make you question what they were capable of. The first story starts with a roommate, an awkward, quiet kid whose stare didn't blink long enough. The kind of silence that fills the room like another presence. At first you'd think he's just shy, maybe anxious, but then he starts watching you in your sleep. He doesn't move when you talk to him. He opens your emails, your bags, your door at night. You wake up to the sound of a zipper and realize it's not yours. The second story happens deep inside a college nature preserve, a place students used to drink, laugh, and hide from campus security. But laughter doesn't last long when the forest starts listening back. First, it's branches cracking somewhere beyond the firelight. Then, a voice that doesn't answer when you call out. When something throws a tree branch through your campfire, you realize you're not alone, and whoever's out there isn't afraid to get close. The third story feels more human, until it doesn't. It starts at a fraternity house, a cheap, overcrowded party, music too loud, and faces that all look the same under red lights. You take a drink from a stranger's hand, and that's the last thing you remember before waking up in a dark room and realizing there's someone else breathing inside the closet. The last one is quieter. A single dorm at the end of a hall. The knocking starts soft, almost polite, like a friend trying not to wake you. Then it comes every night, louder, faster, until the moment you open the door and realize whoever's been knocking was never a student here. What ties all of them together isn't the fear, it's that these moments were real to someone. Someone who still hears the sounds when they close their eyes. Someone who can't walk down a dorm hallway at night without checking over their shoulder. And someone who, to this day, can't forget that last sound before everything went still. Because sometimes the real horror of college isn't failing a class or losing friends. It's realizing that people don't need masks or monsters to be terrifying. Sometimes, all it takes is a knock. That comes after midnight. It was my first week of college. The air still smelled like new carpet and fresh paint, and the hallway buzzed with the kind of nervous excitement only freshmen have. I had just unpacked the last box when my roommate finally arrived. His name was Dale. The moment he walked in, something about him felt off. Not in a way you could describe, but in the kind that makes your stomach tighten for no reason. He didn't greet me at first. I had to stand up, smile, and extend my hand. He looked at it for a second, like he was trying to figure out what it was, before giving me the limpest handshake I've ever felt. His hand was cold, damp. When I told him my name, he didn't say his until I asked. He said Dale, like it was a word he wasn't sure belonged to him. We tried small talk, but it went nowhere. Every question I asked got a one-word answer. Yeah, no, maybe sometimes. Followed by a laugh that felt forced. Like he'd read that normal people laugh sometimes and was trying to copy it. Within minutes, we were both sitting on our beds, facing our laptops, pretending the other didn't exist. I remember thinking, okay, this is temporary. I'll request a new roommate. But Dale wasn't just awkward. He was something else entirely. That first night, after walking around campus and meeting a few guys on my floor, I came back to find him sitting in the exact same position as when I'd left. Laptop open, face lit blue by the screen, eyes empty. I said, "Hey, what's up?" No response. I shrugged it off, turned off my lamp, and tried to sleep. He didn't close his laptop until 3 in the morning. The faint clack of his keyboard was the last thing I heard before finally drifting off. But an hour later, I woke up. The blinds were open now, and moonlight was leaking into the room. That's when I noticed Dale. He was sitting on the edge of his bed, staring directly at me. His face was pale, his lips barely moving. "What the hell are you doing?" I asked. He whispered, "Sorry," and slowly lay back down. The next morning he was gone. For the first time since move-in day, I felt relief. But later that day during orientation, I saw him again in the school garden, crouched behind some bushes, rubbing the bark of a tree with both hands. He wasn't talking to anyone, just touching it, over and over. The group I was with whispered about the weird kid in the bushes. I laughed awkwardly and said, "That's my roommate." That night, when I came back to the dorm, Dale was sitting at my desk facing the door, motionless, like he'd been waiting for me. "Oh hey," I said, forcing a laugh. "You good?" "Nothing," he said. "Just that one word." I sat down on my bed and opened my laptop and immediately noticed something wrong. Every email in my inbox was marked as read, even the ones I hadn't opened. Some folders had been rearranged, files moved. My chest tightened. "Dale," I said carefully, "did you use my laptop?" He didn't even let me finish before saying, "No," too quickly, too loud. The sound of it made me flinch. I didn't argue. I just wanted to sleep and get through the night. My stuff felt moved though. My bag, my clothes, my things didn't sit where I'd left them. I told myself to let it go. I was getting reassigned to another room tomorrow. That night, around 2 a.m., I woke up again. The sound this time was a zipper. My bag. I sat up and turned on my lamp. Dale was kneeling on the floor, his hands deep in my duffel. "Dude, what the hell are you doing?" He froze, eyes wide, mouth slightly open. Then he said, "I think you have my toothbrush." It was the most absurd lie I'd ever heard. I stared at him, and for a long second, neither of us spoke. Then he stood up, climbed into bed, and turned away. By morning, I was gone, moved into my new room across the building, with a roommate who actually said hello. I finally felt like I could breathe again. But peace doesn't last long in stories like this. It was the third night in my new room when it happened. I woke up to a faint clicking sound, not random rhythmic, patient, twice every half minute maybe. I tried to ignore it, but the sound kept pulling at me. It was coming from the door. I got up, walked across the dark room, and pressed my eye to the peephole. At first, I saw nothing. Then I realized there was a head just below the frame. Someone was standing right outside, facing the door, looking down. The faint clicks were coming from the knob. Someone was trying to unlock it. My throat went dry. My new roommate was asleep, breathing softly, unaware. I grabbed my phone and called campus security. The dispatcher said an officer was on the way. I stood there, staring at the doorknob, waiting for it to move. Within minutes, flashing lights hit the window. Voices echoed down the hall. I heard a thud, a shout, and then silence. When the knock finally came, I opened the door and saw Dale in handcuffs. He didn't look at me, just kept his eyes on the floor, mumbling something under his breath that I couldn't understand. The officers took him away. They said he'd been caught trying to pick the lock with something sharp. I never saw him again after that. Maybe he got expelled. Maybe worse. I didn't care. But sometimes, even now, when I wake up in the middle of the night to a faint clicking sound, I still see the shape of his head, waiting quietly on the other side of the door. There was a place on campus most people didn't know about, a patch of woods that stretched behind the university lake, quiet and untouched, except for the small clearing where a few of us went to drink and talk. It was far from campus lights, far from any kind of supervision, and that's exactly what made it perfect. At night, it looked like the world had ended just beyond the tree line. It was October, one of those nights that smells like cold leaves and smoke. My friends and I, 3 of us, brought a backpack full of cheap beer and a lighter for the fire pit we'd built out of stolen bricks the month before. We didn't go there to get wild. We went there to feel like we had a place that was ours. We lit the fire and sat close enough to feel the heat bite our faces. The woods behind us breathed and crackled. There was no wind, but the trees moved anyway, creaking softly as if adjusting to watch us. The night stretched on easily. We talked about nothing, girls. classes, stupid jokes that only made sense when you were half drunk. I remember one of us laughing so hard he rolled into the dirt, tears in his eyes. Then, suddenly, the laughter stopped. "Shh," someone said. It wasn't the kind of shh that follows a joke. It was the kind that freezes your blood. We listened. The sound came from somewhere behind the fire. Leaves crunching. Slow, uneven footsteps. They stopped when we stopped. "Probably a deer," my friend whispered, though he didn't sound convinced. We all stayed quiet. The fire popped once, sharp as a gunshot, and I swear I saw something shift just beyond the light, a shadow moving between two trees, then vanishing. That was when we heard a branch snap. Loud, close. We panicked, tossed the empty bottles into the lake to hide them, stuffed the rest of the beers into the bag, and tried to act calm even though our hearts were thudding so loud they drowned the crickets. I remember scanning the trees, trying to spot anything, anyone, but the darkness in the woods doesn't reflect light, it swallows it. The fire felt smaller now, like a spotlight on prey. The steps came again, circling us this time. I couldn't tell how many there were, one person, maybe two, but the sound kept shifting, staying just out of sight. It was as if someone was pacing in a wide arc around the clearing, never crossing into the firelight, but never leaving either. "Hello?" One of my friends finally shouted. His voice cracked halfway through. No answer, just the echo of his voice and the sound of something brushing against bark. We sat frozen for what felt like minutes, then another noise. Not footsteps this time, but the heavy thud of something hitting the ground. A branch, thick and freshly broken, landed in the middle of the fire pit, scattering ash and sparks into the air. One of my friends bolted immediately, sprinting toward the path without a word. The other and I just stared at each other. I remember half laughing, because my brain refused to accept what was happening. Then the laugh turned into a scream when my friend next to me was hit across the face by another branch thrown from the dark. That broke whatever courage we had left. I grabbed him by the arm, scooped up the backpack, and we ran. The woods felt endless. The ground seemed to tilt, the trees blurring together, our breath tearing out in ragged gasps. Every few seconds, we heard the unmistakable rhythm of someone chasing us, footsteps crunching, not running fast, but steady. When we finally broke through the tree line and saw the yellow glow of the road lamps, we didn't stop. Not until we reached the dorm building across the street. My lungs burned. I could taste blood in my throat. My friend collapsed against the wall, pressing his hand to his bleeding cheek. And then, we heard it again. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, stopping just at the edge of the road. We looked toward the woods and saw a figure standing there too far to make out the face, but close enough to see the shape of a person pacing back and forth just beyond the trees. Every time a car passed, its headlights flashed across them for a split second, and the figure would step back, disappearing into the darkness. Then they'd come out again, pacing, watching. We stayed there, frozen, until the sound stopped. Eventually, whoever it was slipped back into the forest. We made it up to the dorm room, shut the door, and tried to laugh about it. Tried to convince ourselves it was a prank. Maybe some other students messing around. We even opened more beers, pretending to celebrate how ridiculous it had been. But laughter didn't come as easy this time. Every sound from the hallway made us jump. The shadows through the window seemed too sharp, too alive. When I finally fell asleep that night, I dreamed of branches moving against the moonlight and something crouched just beyond the fire, smiling where no light could reach. The next morning, it hit us what we'd escaped could have been worse. Whoever had been out there wasn't lost. They knew exactly where we were, exactly when to throw, and the woods, those woods, were supposed to be empty. We never went back after dark again, not once. It was my first real week of college life. The kind of week where everything still feels new, where you convince yourself every party might become a story you'll tell for years. My roommate was obsessed with joining a fraternity. He'd spent days reading about them, ranking them like he was picking a future. I didn't care much about Greek life, but he didn't want to go alone. So, Thursday night, I went with him. The house was off campus, tucked into a part of town. Students usually avoided narrow streets, broken streetlights, half-empty houses with porches that leaned forward like they were tired. When we pulled up, the only reason we knew which house it was came from the music. Muffled bass thumping through the windows, the kind that shakes in your chest before you even open the door. A guy answered short, sweating through a white t-shirt, his red plastic cup sloshing as he waved us in. Inside, the smell hit first: beer, sweat, and something sour underneath. The air was thick, humid from too many bodies packed into one place. The lights were dim red bulbs, and one flickering lamp that made faces look unfamiliar, like masks melting under heat. I followed my roommate through the crowd, nodding to strangers who didn't look back. 50 guys, maybe more, all shoulder to shoulder, laughing too loud, yelling over music. There were almost no girls. The few who were there looked uncomfortable, cornered by clusters of men pretending to joke. I tried to relax. I talked to a few people. A foreign student who wouldn't stop explaining the science of getting drunk faster. Another guy who slurred through a story about stealing traffic cones. Nothing about the place felt right. The laughter didn't sound real. The smiles didn't reach eyes. After about 20 minutes, I leaned to my roommate and said, "We should head out soon." He nodded but pointed toward the door. A group of heavy guys were blocking it, talking, their eyes shifting between us and each other. We decided to wait. That's when someone new came up to me. A big man, his shirt stretched tight over his chest, a small bottle in his hand. He smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes either. "Try this," he said, voice low, like a challenge. "Get you shit-faced quick." I didn't want to, but he was watching me too intently. Around us, the room pulsed with noise. I felt small, cornered. So I laughed, took the bottle, and downed it in one gulp. It burned going down, but not like alcohol should. It was chemical, almost sweet. The man kept talking, asking me questions I can't remember. I nodded, smiled, tried to move away, but he followed, every time stepping closer. My vision started to tilt. The lights smeared across the room. The music slowed. I remember gripping the edge of a couch to steady myself, feeling the world collapse inward. And then nothing. When I woke, it was dark. Not dim, but the kind of dark that presses against your face. My head pounded. The air was stale. I was lying on something soft, a bed, maybe. The only sound came from behind a door. Muffled music, distant laughter. I realized I was still in the house. As my eyes adjusted, I saw the outlines of furniture. A small dresser, a chair, a closed closet door across the room. I sat up slowly, every movement heavier than it should have been. My phone was gone. My shoes, too. That's when I heard it. A faint crunching sound, like plastic being stepped on. It came from the closet. At first, I froze, telling myself it was nothing, just the house settling maybe. But the sound came again, a slow, deliberate shift of weight. Someone was in there. My mouth went dry. I tried to speak, but couldn't. Instead, I swung my legs off the bed and stood, every step toward the door feeling longer than it should. I turned the knob quietly, praying it wouldn't creak. When I pulled it open, the hall was empty, except for the low pulse of red light from the living room. Behind me, something moved. The crunch again louder now, unmistakable. I ran, down the stairs, past the sweaty crowd, through the circle of men by the front door. Someone grabbed my shoulder, but I shoved past, stumbled into the street. I didn't look back. My roommate was outside, smoking near the car, eyes wide when he saw me. "Dude, where the hell were you?" "Inside," I said, breathless. "We need to go, now." He didn't ask again. We got in the car and drove in silence. The longer we drove, the clearer my head became, and the heavier the fear settled in. When we finally reached campus, he asked the question I didn't want to hear. "Do you think they did something to you?" I checked myself. My clothes were the same, unbuttoned the way I'd left them. My body ached, but not in that way. I shook my head, unsure if I believed it. "No," I said quietly. "I don't think so." But something had happened. I'd been gone for maybe 10 minutes, maybe longer. Time had slipped away in the dark, and there had been someone else in that room. I was sure of it. For weeks after, I'd wake in the middle of the night, certain I'd heard plastic crinkling near my closet. The sound never lasted long, just enough to jolt me awake. I never went near that part of town again. Never went to another fraternity party. My roommate still rushed, still wanted the brotherhood. I told him he could have it, because whatever they were doing in that house wasn't brotherhood. It was something older, meaner, the kind of thing that hides behind music and laughter until the lights go out and you realize you're not the guest anymore. You're the experiment. Sophomore year was supposed to be easier. You already knew where everything was, how to survive the cafeteria food, which professors hated late work. I had a single dorm that semester. No roommate, no noise, no awkward conversations. It was tucked at the far end of the hall, a corner room separated from the others by a small turn. Most people didn't even know there was a door down there. That privacy was the reason I chose it. For the first few weeks, it was perfect. Until the knocking started. The first time was on a Tuesday night. I was at my desk studying for a biology exam. The kind of night when silence feels heavy. At first, I thought I imagined it a faint tap-tap on the door. So soft I almost didn't hear it. When it came again, I called out, "Come in!" No answer. I got up, opened the door, and found nobody. The hallway around the corner was empty. Every door closed. I shrugged it off as some idiot playing around. The next night, it happened again. Louder this time, more deliberate. 3 sharp knocks. I called out, "Who is it?" Silence. The air in the room felt suddenly colder. I opened the door faster this time, stepping out before I could think twice. Again, nothing. The hallway was so quiet I could hear the hum of the vending machine 30 feet away. I tried to laugh it off, told myself it was just nerves, or maybe someone drunk looking for another room. But by the third night, it was impossible to ignore. I'd been asleep for maybe 3 hours when the sound woke me, rapid, violent banging, like fists slamming on wood. My heart went straight to my throat. I hesitated, debating whether to open it at all. Something in me said not to, but curiosity is its own kind of poison. I threw off the covers, flipped on the lamp, and yanked the door open. The hallway was empty. I stared down the narrow corridor leading to the corner and saw only darkness, then movement. The back of someone disappearing around the far end of the hall. Without thinking, I chased them. My bare feet slapped against the cold tile. When I turned the corner, I saw a door closing, the one at the end of the hall. Not a dorm, a bathroom. I stopped outside, breathing hard, listening. The sound inside was faint. Slow footsteps, maybe. A shuffle of shoes. Then, stillness. I told myself it was just another student, but it was nearly 3 in the morning. Nobody would be taking a shower now. I reached for the handle and pushed the door open. The light was off. I flicked the switch, and the flicker of fluorescent bulbs filled the room with harsh white light. 2 stalls stood at the far end, both closed. The mirror above the sinks was fogged with faint fingerprints. Though no showers had run, something felt wrong. The silence wasn't natural. It was listening. I crouched slowly, my knees trembling, and looked under the stall doors. That's when I saw them. Boots. Heavy, black, old-fashioned, the kind of boots no student wore. They were pointed straight toward me still, waiting. I froze. My mouth went dry. For a second, I thought about yelling. Then I noticed something else. The boots weren't moving. They weren't connected to legs. They were just sitting there. My breath caught, and then I heard it a laugh. Low, broken, rasping. Not like a young voice, not playful. It was the kind of laugh that sounds cracked, ancient. The sound of someone enjoying a joke you don't understand. That was enough. My courage evaporated. I turned and ran out of the bathroom, down the hall, around the corner, back to my room. I slammed the door and locked it twice, hands shaking too hard to text anyone. The knocking came again that night. I didn't move, didn't answer. It went on for maybe 30 seconds, each knock slower, heavier, until it finally stopped. I sat there in bed, staring at the doorknob, half expecting it to turn. The next morning, I asked everyone on my floor if they'd been messing with me. Every single one of them said no. They looked as confused as I felt. Nobody else had heard knocking. Nobody else had seen anyone wandering the halls. I tried to rationalize it, maybe sleep deprivation, maybe a prank I didn't catch. But deep down, I knew what I'd seen. The boots, the laugh, the door closing by itself, and that creeping sense that whoever it was didn't just stumble into my corner of the building, they'd chosen it. For the rest of the semester, I slept with my lamp on. Sometimes, late at night, I'd hear a faint creak in the hallway, like weight shifting on tile. My pulse would start to race, but I never checked again. Some things are better left unconfirmed. By winter break, I switched dorms. My new room was louder, smaller, shared with another student who snored. But at least it felt alive. On my last day in the old room, I stood at the doorway one final time, looking down that narrow stretch of hall. It was empty. The air was still. I almost convinced myself it had all been in my head. Then, as I turned to leave, I heard it. 3 soft knocks on the door from the inside. I didn't wait to check, and I never went back. College is supposed to be the safest chaos of your life. 4 years of noise, mistakes, and stories that start with laughter. But these stories don't end that way. They start with the same promise. A new beginning, a clean dorm, a stranger who might become a friend. And then, slowly, something slips. The air changes. The laughter fades. And what's left is that quiet realization that you are not as safe as you thought. Every person who told these stories swore they were real. The details shift, the timelines blur, but the fear stays the same. The roommate who watched too long, the footsteps circling the fire, the stranger with the drink, the knock that didn't stop. They all share a pattern, that thin line between the ordinary and the unexplainable, between someone being weird and someone wanting to hurt you. The scariest thing about college isn't the rumors about haunted dorms or cursed classrooms. It's that everyone around you is still figuring out who they are, and some of them are learning they can do terrible things without feeling anything at all. You'll hear these stories whispered at parties, between shots and laughter. You'll hear people call them urban legends or friend of a friend tales. But when you listen closely, when you catch the tremor in the voice of the one who tells it, you start to realize they're not trying to entertain you. They're trying to warn you. Late at night, when the hallway goes quiet, it's easy to forget how thin those dorm walls really are. You hear someone moving outside your door, and you tell yourself it's nothing. Someone laughs 2 rooms over, and it echoes wrong too deep, too slow. You check your phone, scroll until your eyelids burn, and try to convince yourself the noise you heard was just the pipes, or the wind, or your imagination. But every person who's lived through something like this says the same thing: it doesn't feel like imagination when it happens. It feels heavy, cold, deliberate. It feels like the moment before something breaks. Maybe that's why so many of these stories start the same way. I thought I was safe. I thought I was alone. I thought it was just my mind. Until it wasn't. And when it finally happens to you, when the knock comes, or the light flickers, or you realize someone's been standing just outside your door a little too long, you don't scream. You don't even breathe. You just listen. Because somewhere, deep down, you already know that whatever's on the other side isn't there by mistake. It found you for a reason. So when you move into that next dorm, when you unpack your things and tape your photos to the wall, remember, every door holds a story. Every hallway has someone who once swore they heard knocking where there should have been silence. And if that knock ever comes for you, soft, polite, patient, don't answer it. Not because it might be a ghost, but because sometimes the real monsters don't disappear when the lights come on. They wait, quietly, just outside the door.